Mark Rogers TV talking college football, and it's always a great discussion with Elizabeth Sturdivant of 3 Yards in the Cloud. And we can't bypass last weekend's activity on the field at the Big House, Elizabeth. We have to address Michigan State. We were all I actually dropped the remote. I was about to turn off the game, go to something else. I just dropped the remote. I didn't have any investment in the game, but it still hit me like, wow, this is one of those, the play, kick six, the whole deal. This is going to go down in history.
Absolutely. I felt the same way. And you're right. I didn't have any personal investment in the game either, but watching it was so shocking. And it was like, I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know if I should have felt excited for Michigan State or if I should have just felt sick for Michigan. You could just go either way. It's funny. I watched that game in parts. I was flipping back and forth. But it was very clear, I felt, that even though Michigan State was lucky, very lucky in the end to win that game. I've seen people post where they had like a 2% chance of winning at that point or something.
0.2.
What was it?
0.2.
0.2. Oh, 0.2, even better. But ultimately, I feel like Michigan State was the better team that day, and they did outplay Michigan. I want to say Michigan State had 20 first downs. Michigan had 10. They outgained them in total yardage, almost 2-1. So I felt the better team ultimately won, but they did get very lucky, in the end, and that's just part of college football. I do feel like it is a true testament to Harbaugh, though, to put the inferior team in a position to win that game. I think he's done a really good job of putting Rudock in positions that help him and benefit him and doesn't really expose Rudock's weaknesses. He's put together, pretty good game plans to help them out, I think, in that way. So crazy game.
Yeah, I love the point that you made. The coach can only put the players in position to win the game. Harbaugh should have won a Super Bowl, but he can't complete a 4th and 5 pass. He can only put his team in position to win the Super Bowl. They were down by a few points. They didn't win the game. They didn't complete the passes, Colin Kaepernick. This one, he can't catch the ball for the punter. He can't make the right play on the field, but he put the team in position. And Michigan, 2014 versus 15, completely different team. And we've got to credit him. Same players on the field. Michigan State did 2 things in that game that nobody has done against Michigan. Number one, bottle up their running attack. Devion Smith only had 46 yards on 19 carries, and they also threw the ball downfield. Connor Cook, 328 yards passing. So Michigan State, tons of injuries, still pull out the game inexplicably at the Big House. Meanwhile, in Columbus, the other undefeated team in the Big Ten now, no disregard to Iowa, of course, out west, is Ohio State. And the quarterback battle, this has been going on since the championship game of last year. Who should be starting at quarterback? JT Barrett appears to be the guy that should be starting.
I'm with you, Mark, and I don't understand it. I have to trust that Urban Meyer obviously knows more than I do. But just watching, you can clearly see the offense just seems to move better with Barrett. I feel like they're not even in a rhythm without him. And I don't understand. Ohio State has clearly some of the best talent in the country. This is still the same team they had last year that dominated Alabama and ultimately won the championship. Why can't they get in that rhythm this year? And I really feel like it's because Barrett isn't the starter. And we're all scratching our heads. I don't know why.
Elizabeth, I feel like such a fool questioning one of the greatest coaches of all time. We're talking about a guy, I don't know if you heard this stat, he just completed another 20-game winning streak. So he has 4 in his career. Nobody else has more than 2. 4 20-game winning streaks, meaning he's 80-0 during 4 stretches of coaching during his career, and that's 2 20-game winnings streaks at Ohio State. But unless you need a quarterback that's going to consistently use his 250-pound frame to move the sticks on 4th and inches, that's what Cardell Jones has over JT Barrett. The other thing is he can throw the ball through a brick wall. He can throw it 70 yards, but I don't see any team in the country consistently throwing 70-yard passes. Barrett can throw it 55. He anticipates the throws better. He's on time with the offense. The offense runs much better. He's got a better grasp of the offense. He's more accurate. He's more calm and cool and has the offense under control. And he's more elusive runner. He's faster. The defense has to account for his running ability. So I just don't understand it. And the stat that I shared with you before we talked, before we came on and recorded, is last game they played the same number of plays. JT Barrett 8.5 yards per play. Cardell Jones 4, 5 touchdowns with JT running the offense, and 0 with Cardell Jones running the offense. So I think it's pretty plain at this point.
I agree with you, and I'm with you on. I feel like a fool when you question one of the best football coaches in history. So we have to trust there's something that they're seeing that we're not. But I do think in the end, if they don't commit to one quarterback, it's going to hurt them. I'm still a big believer in when you don't have when you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. That is 99% of the cases in that situation. Look, it hurt Alabama at the beginning of the season when they did not commit to a quarterback and they switched for the Ole Miss game and they brought in Cooper Bateman. It was a disaster. And what they didn't give Coker time to develop, they didn't give him time to get the experience. And Coker wasn't hurting Alabama. But he wasn't losing the game for Alabama. And they brought Bateman in, who completely hurt Alabama in the beginning with an interception that led to a touchdown. And then Coker had to sort of come in and clean up the mess. But once they committed to Coker, the offense has done nothing but improve and thrive since then. And I really want to see the same out of Ohio State, especially if they expect to make it to the playoffs. They're really going to have to commit to one.
Elizabeth Sturdivant joining us from 3 Yards in the Cloud. Please join out her site there and check out her latest content. So let's flip the page to this week. And you brought up that coach, you brought up that team, talking about one of the best coaches in college football history. I did one of these after Alabama lost to Ole Miss. There was so much fuming out there. Saban, get rid of him. The game's passed him by. All these ridiculous comments all over social media and otherwise. Okay. There are such things as self-inflicted wounds, and when you get beat, Alabama is a better team than Ole Miss. Credit Ole Miss with taking the opportunity to win the game. But you talk about freak plays and 5 turnovers that were generally not forced. Alabama just had a bad night. This team is really good, maybe the best in the nation despite the loss. They host Tennessee. People getting on Butch Jones. They've got 3 losses, but I'm going to hold the phone on that one as well because he is recruiting like a madman, top 5 recruiting classes, and they're this close on the field. Now, if they're still doing this next year, okay. But right now, I'm good with Tennessee despite the 3-3 record. Just your thoughts about the Tide hosting the Vols.
Yeah, I'll actually go back and say I never bought into the return of Tennessee football for this year. I actually took the bet of them winning less than 7.5 games. Wow. When they are recruiting. The problem is last year, you look at who they beat. That's sort of what started all the hype. They beat teams with a losing record, and Josh Dobbs wasn't good enough to start at the beginning of last season, and then he came in at the end. Granted, I do think he's improved this year, and look, I think Tennessee has improved from where they were last year. Obviously, they outplayed Florida in the swamp, but it came down to really immature coaching. That cost them the game. So, look, I really feel like Tennessee at best is going to be a 7-6 team this year. I've heard too many excuses out of Butch Jones about their team being young. I just don't know what great team they have to win with some young players. And Butch Jones is going to have to find a way to win with young players. But I don't think they're going to do it this week against Alabama. What I saw out of Alabama last week, I saw probably the most disciplined defense I've seen in years. Alabama's defensive front was just playing so disciplined, not getting out of their lanes, forcing the quarterback. They really did a great job of containing Kyle Allen and keeping him in there and forced him to throw those pick sixes, in that game. Another thing I look at with Alabama is at the beginning of the season, not only did we have sort of a big question at the quarterback, We had a really big question at the secondary. Our secondary just wasn't playing very well. They weren't in a groove. And all of a sudden, they have gone from huge question marks to hurting the team to now being one of the strengths of the team. And when I see their defensive front playing like that, Derrick Henry is one of the best running backs in the country. You see our secondary is now, we've got 10 interceptions, I believe, in the last 4 games. And now you turn around, we've got a quarterback who not only is not hurting Alabama, he's helping Alabama. He's taken leadership of the team. I don't think Tennessee has a chance to beat Alabama this week. And I'm actually taking Alabama to win by 14 points or more in this game this week.
Is that the spread right now?
Lost the spread right now.
Okay. Haven't checked out the spreads yet, but I was going to guess that game was going to be more in the 17 to 21 range. Yeah, Alabama at home, 2 touchdowns. I think you're making a good pick right there from what I've seen. And I think you hit on the big difference between Alabama and the rest of the SEC. And I think this is the best conference in the country still. Derrick Henry, I know Leonard Fournette, but besides LSU, and now that Nick Chubb is hurt, there are really good running backs on almost every team in the SEC. But Derrick Henry's in another league with Leonard Fournette. The other thing, you bring up the front 7 on defense. Alabama has separated itself. I think Ohio State has similar talent, but Alabama has the best talent and best production on the field from the front 7. The secondary, they had the talent. There were just issues last year, blowing coverages, just poor play in the secondary. They have shored that up. And then the other is just, while the SEC, by and large, and certainly the top 5 to 6 teams recruit better than just about everybody in the country, aside from the USC's and Ohio State's, Alabama's is so ridiculous that they have a couple of freshmen like a Calvin Ridley who steps onto the field as a true freshman, and he's producing big plays in big games.
Yeah, and I think you made a great point, too, when people were freaking out after the Ole Miss game. Some people are going to call me a homer. I don't care. I don't think the better team won that night. I do think Ole Miss had just as good a talent on the field that night. But Ole Miss, they lack the depth that Alabama has to make it all the way through the season. It showed up last year when they lost Treadwell and Kimdichie last year. They were doing well. They lose those 2 guys. They started losing. Last week they lose Kimdichie, who is one of the best defensive players in the country, and they lost really bad last week. And so when they turned around, I thought Ole Miss was really lucky to get Alabama the 3rd week of the season. And it took still 5 turnovers and a freak play, like you pointed out, for Ole Miss, to win that game. But turnovers are correctable. And so when you look at what Bama had, in the way they were improving every week, they're not going to have another game with 5 turnovers. I think that's what you look at. And I think, look, hats off to Ole Miss for winning that game. I do think they were a little lucky to win that game. And I do think Alabama is the better team. And I think they're getting more and more dominant each week.
Yeah, it's one thing when you're turning the ball over because your quarterback can't read a defense and he's making poor decisions, and you really need to work on that. Or your left tackle's horrible and he gets whipped off the line and your quarterback's getting blindsided every other play. It's another thing when you're muffing punts. Okay, go practice that this week and let's not muff punts. We're good enough to catch the ball. Let's shore that up. You also pointed out a game that before we started recording, Utah and USC. Now, if you're just looking at this game as an innocent bystander and trying to take an unbiased view, it would seem obvious who the favorite in this game. You brought up the Tennessee-Alabama point spread. I checked this one out. USC's a favorite at home against Utah. Utah, the undefeated team, getting #1 votes. USC lost its 3rd game. Perception turns out to be a lot when it comes to a number of things in life, but including the lines in Vegas as well.
Yeah, in lines like this, you do. That's when you see a line and you got to take a step back, because your first reaction, you want it to be, well, that's crazy. That doesn't make any sense. And those are the lines you really want to pay the most attention to. You have to trust, just like as in we trust our head coaches, that they know best. I also trust that Vegas knows best. They don't sleep. They've got stats guys who work around the clock who come up with these lines. There's a reason the lines are where they're at. when you look at USC and Utah, look, I'm not one of those people that thinks Utah shouldn't be ranked where they are. I think this point in the season, I'm fine with where they're ranked. I think they deserve it. I also think that the Pac-12 South is probably the toughest division in college football. But when you look at Utah, you look at USC, when it comes down to it, USC just has better talent. They have been recruiting lights out for the past few years. And of course, they had to rebuild from their sanctions. And so I didn't believe that USC, with their top talent, would make it to the playoffs this year. I do think they have a shot next year, though. And it's sort of unfortunate what's happened with Coach Sark. I mean, they've been sort of a disaster, you know, with that. And so, but what I really love, not only do I think USC has better talent, better athleticism on their team than Utah. What I really liked seeing out of USC was the way they responded last week against Notre Dame. I felt like we finally saw the USC team that we thought we were going to get at the beginning of the season. And they've showed it, and it's gone back and forth, and clearly we all know why. Why now? But I really liked the way they responded last week. And this week, I actually love for USC to beat Utah. Cody Kessler, you know, the sad thing is I think he should have been a Heisman candidate, you know, and under better circumstances, you know, with a better coach, it probably could have put him in a better position for that. I think he's the better quarterback on the field this Saturday. And I think USC definitely pulls out this win. And that will finally sort of start balancing out where some of these people think Utah should really be. But for right now, I'm fine with them being where they are, and let's let the season play out.
Yeah, I would be surprised if Utah is able to survive that division and make it all the way to the Pac-12 championship game unscathed. I see 1 to 2 losses in its future, but if they're able to do it, and they have to date, more credit to them. I've got them ranked #1 in the country. Again, I try to put the brakes on here. This is not based on my perception of who's the best. I do not think they're one of the top 5 teams in the country, but I believe that they have beaten the best competition for an undefeated team to date. So they still have to play USC. They still have a date with, I still think they have UCLA. They have a number of other teams waiting, and of course the Pac-12 championship game. So I think, Elizabeth, next time I track you down, you've set us up for a nice little debate, a little maybe fantasy football debate of sorts, the Pac-12 South versus the SEC West, because I know who I would side with if we went team by team in that debate.
I'll have to, yeah, I know it's a debate. I mean, I think you could go either way on that. But like I said, I want to see how the season plays out. I think the biggest difference between the Pac-12 and the SEC going into the season was, you know, quarterback play. And I think the Pac-12 has better quarterback play than the SEC. So that's where you sort of get into all of that. But look, I have to throw in, Stanford is they were one of my preseason teams to make it to the playoffs, just because they run the ball, and I love Kevin Hogan, and he's done a great job. And it was funny after they lost to Northwestern. I thought, wow, there goes that pick. But then when they played USC, I actually picked Stanford to upset USC that week, nice. And they did. And so I'm sticking. It's funny, that pick so far is looking like that could potentially happen. So we'll see. But
that team's good. That team is really good because they've matched their typical fundamental play, toughness, and they have game changers and game breakers like they haven't had, i.e. Christian McCaffrey in particular, that they have not had in the past. That is a really good football team, no doubt about that. So remind us, what were your college football playoff picks before the season?
Well, I had one really bad one. My number 4 team to make it was Georgia Tech. And clearly that's not happening. They've been a disaster. Stanford was number 3. And I'll tell you, my number 2 pick is pretty interesting because this is lining up to be true. My number 2 pick was the winner of the Alabama LSU game.
Are you allowed to do that? The winner of?
Well, that's what we do in 3 Years in the Cloud.
Okay.
I really felt like that game was going to be like it has been in the past, where that's sort of the game of the year, where and it's shaping up to look like that. You've got 2 powerhouse defenses. You've got 2 Heisman candidate running backs. You know, and it's going to be really, really fun to watch. So that's what I did for my number 2 pick. And then, of course, my number one pick was Ohio State because of talent. And their talent, and I felt like they were going to be able to get through their season to make it to the playoffs. So I've lost one, but I've still got 3 right in there in the running.
Oh, yeah, you're doing better than me. I had Ohio State, Alabama, but then Oklahoma, UCLA.
Yes.
So not so good. Not so good. Maybe I'll have to say I had UCLA, the winner of the UCLA Stanford game. Maybe I'll change that.
There you go.
That's a good way to do that.
Yeah, well, I love the way that UCLA has been playing, and like I think they have a great quarterback in Rosen as well. So I thought that's a pretty good pick. It's better than my Georgia Tech pick.
They have a big future. They've gotten hurt on defense, lost 3 of their best players, but that's football. That happens. All right, Elizabeth Sturdivant from 3 Yards in the Cloud. Hey, Elizabeth, before we let you go, what are you working on these days?
Well, right now I'm still just doing my picks every week, and I'm picking games against the spread and just trying to deliver it in a really fun and entertaining way. And I've also got a couple other competitions going on the side where we pick just about all of the college football games. And so far I'm over 50%. So I'm trying to outplay the boys here right now. So we'll see if I win out in the end.
Well done. All right, Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining us. It's always a good discussion.
Thanks, Mark. I had fun.